Hey, it's Chuck Armstrong with Loudwire Nights, and this is Loudwire Nights on Demand. I love shining a spotlight on new music, man, and that's exactly what we did with Sebastian James as we celebrated his debut solo album, Old School Cool. This interview first aired on Wednesday, October 9th. Enjoy. Well, I've said it many, many times, and I'm going to keep on saying it, but it's been a great time to be a rock fan lately, and it's not just because of the great new music we're still getting from veterans and longtime artists, but it's because of new artists, new musicians, new songwriters who keep that fire alive. And tonight I'm beyond excited to welcome one of those new artists to the show. We are hanging with Sebastian James. Sebastian, thank you so much for being here, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. Big fan of the show. Absolute honor to finally get the chance to connect.
Right on, man. Yeah, I'm glad this has worked out. So listen, right out of the gate, I just got to say congrats on the release of your debut album, Old School Cool. How's it feel to have this thing wrapped up, man?
It's a big relief. Honestly, it's something that I've been working really hard on for the better part of the last year and a half or so. Something that I've always, wanted to do as far as putting out a solo record and telling some of those stories that I haven't told yet. So it's kind of all of the feelings, it's relieving. It's a breath of fresh air. It's exciting. It's all the above.
Well, and you say working a long time on this. I mean, when it first was announced, I think you said this is kind of it's kind of autobiographical for you. I mean, does it feel that way? Like as you kind of sit back and think about this record, think about the songs on this album, that this really is like like it's your story?
It really is, man. It was crazy as we started to do pre-production for the videos, was really the first time that it had hit me. So we were doing American Made and When We Were Young, actually shot them both the same day. But as I'm helping write these scripts and these storyboards, I realized really right there just how personal it was. These are all true stories. They come from the heart. They're experiences that I've lived and gone through for the first 30 years or so. So I'm really glad, to have a platform to have them come out of my mouth and to finally shed some light on those.
Is it weird to have this album be like that? I think about this being your debut album and it having that kind of weight, that kind of personal weight to it. Like now it's out and, no doubt you're thinking about what's next and what's coming. Like, is there sort of a pressure on you, or do you feel a sense of pressure for what comes next after working so hard on this album and making it so personal?
Definitely. I think 5 or 10 years ago, I would have been a lot more anxious about it. But at this point in my life and in my career, I really wanted these stories to be told. So, it's really a relief to me in all honesty. And I've been able over the years to work with some awesome guys, so I've worked with guys like Nigel Dupree, my buddy Kyle Cimino. And so we've had these projects, but they weren't necessarily my projects, or, they weren't necessarily fitting for my stories. And so a few of these I've been kicking around for years, just waiting for the opportunity to put out. And I think that time has come.
Right on, man. Well, the latest single, When We Were Young, it was quite the introduction to the album for a lot of people. And for listeners who haven't spent time with the full record yet, though it's already been out for a few days, so let's not waste any time on that. Do you think that's a good indication of what to expect from the other tracks?
Totally. Yeah. When We Were Young is, it's right down the middle. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it's, it sounds like it should have been written for Bon Jovi, or it sounds like it's got a little bit of Kid Rock, and it's kind of just all of the above. And that's what the record is. I mean, really in its simplest form. I'm from Kansas City, born and raised, we're right in the middle of the map. And so I've got so many influences, so many different artists that have come into my life and influenced my style, my writing. And, I think they all kind of funneled into that song. And that one, again, that's a song that's been kicking around for 5 or 6 years. I wrote it right back right after we'd graduated high school with my buddy Kyle Cimino that I mentioned a little earlier, and Trevor Brown. And so I was digging through the archives for this record, and I was like, wow, how did I forget about this track? And so we wrote a new chorus for it. And, it was pretty magical. Hearing it that first time, I was pretty sure that was going to be the big
Yeah,
single.
I love that, man. I love hearing that. Well, you mentioned Kansas City, and you and I are from the same town, man. This great place of KC. Um, did growing up in KC shape you as a musician, as an artist at all?
100%. I was born and raised in Riverside, and a lot of people don't know I spent the first 10 years of my life living in Section 8, low income housing. And, at the time it was hard, as a kid, but looking back, it was so important to my journey. And so to answer your question, during that time, I experienced a ton of different music, not just rock and roll or Midwestern like flavored country, but also hip hop and all of those things I think funneled into what I would become later as an artist. And so I tell people all the time how proud I am to be from here, how
Yeah.
many different people I've met, different walks of life. And I think it's been great to keep helping me become more diverse as an artist.
Yeah, no, I love hearing that, man. And I think about you growing up here, and yeah, going through what you went through, as a kid, as a teenager, and you hit 18 years old, right? And you start touring, you start playing music live. I mean, what pushed you to make that decision as an 18-year-old?
Well, my dad was always an incredible singer, guitar player, kind of regionally renowned. And so I looked up to him a lot as a kid. To me, he was just as big as David Lee Roth or Axl Rose or any of those, stars whose music that he was singing in cover groups. And so it was always something I admired. But I grew up just wanting to play sports, and ride BMX and ride dirt bikes. I didn't think music was really my thing. I didn't know how I felt about the long hair and tattoos. And then at about 12, I started playing the drums, and I knew, right away between doing that. And then I saw the Kiss show that same year out at Sandstone, as us Kansas Cityans still call it. And,
That's
that
right.
was
Yeah.
really the pivotal moment for me where I said, wow, I got to get up there. And so I spent 12 to 18 just woodshedding in the basement, honing my craft, and then started playing with guys live 12 and 13, playing with my dad in the clubs. Did that for 5 years, and then as you said, graduated high school in 2011, and within 2 months or so, I got that call from Nigel Dupree to go out and to drum for him, which, as an 18 to 20-year-old kid, it was just an incredible experience, drinking by the fire hose, getting kind of that
Yeah.
firsthand knowledge of how the industry works. And I just was, super blessed for that opportunity for sure.
Well, and you talk about, you and your dad and looking up to him, and, just to connect some dots for listeners, we love Jesse James Dupree on this show. And we've loved his latest solo album, and his son Nigel, drums on that. He plays guitar when he hits the road with his dad, Jesse. And so I love seeing that connection that you have and that you've had for so long with him.
Dude, it was just such a blast. I reflect on that a lot. I remember, spending Father's Day with Nigel and Jesse. I remember his 50th birthday, and I was gone, and I was on the road and away from my dad at the time. And so it was a really unique experience to kind of see that firsthand and to grab onto it. And I mean, not to mention, I've looked up to those guys. Being from Kansas City, Jackal is rock and roll royalty here. So it just
That's
was
right.
it was a really bizarre but incredible time for sure.
So listen, you've been, really, you made that decision, and you did this when you were 18, and here we are today, a few years later, celebrating the release of your debut album, Old School Cool. I gotta imagine, though, it hasn't been the easiest road, right? That it's not just an overnight sort of thing where, all right, you snap your fingers and you become a rock star.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And that's really been the biggest theme, I think, for me personally, is just staying at it, being consistent. And, I mean, you've got those guys that blow up overnight when they're young. And then you've got the guys that come on in their 30s and even in their 40s. Like I just met Glenn Hughes last week from Deep Purple. And we were chatting kind of about how they broke through and how guys like David Coverdale were, 30 to 40 years old before Whitesnake had hit, before, they crossed over to MTV. And so to me, I'm not going to stop, knocking down those doors until somebody finally answers. And I think that's kind of my biggest piece of advice too, to the
Yeah.
kids now is if you love it, keep trucking, keep doing it until you get where you want to be.
Well, I love hearing that too. And I was just going to say, as you said, that's advice. I know there's people listening who have that desire, or, they've been thinking about it, or yeah, they saw, their own version of seeing Kiss at this amphitheater in their hometown, whatever band that might be, whatever venue that might be, that stirred something inside of them and that made them think like, no, this is what I want to do. And so as you've been doing this for years, as you've been working on this for years, that advice of just doing it, right? Whatever it takes. That seems like, it seems easy to say, I know, but I have to imagine it hasn't always been an easy decision or something that you've thought like, oh no, this is the right thing.
Yeah, no, it's been definitely some dark days in there and some cloudy days of, questioning what I'm supposed to be doing. As a father now too, there were a lot of years where, I was trying to obviously chase my dream and not let it kind of dwindle down to nothing, but I also had to get my butt back into college. I had to work 9 to 5 jobs, and there were days where I just was doing it all. And I guess looking back, I'm glad that I stuck to my own advice now in the present day. But it's definitely been a journey, and I think that's the thing that listeners honestly don't get to see enough of. You see the glamour stories, but I think we need a little more rags to riches, some of those hard earned, longer winded, journeys to getting where you want to be.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. We actually just had Nick Hexum on the show from 311, and maybe different kind of music, but from the Midwest too, from Nebraska, and he talked a lot about that, just about that sort of Midwestern mentality, that work ethic, whatever you want to call it. And every region has their own version of that. I know, it's not just a Midwest thing, but certainly, man, growing up in Section 8 housing, growing up, idolizing your dad and seeing your dad, and then seeing Kiss and just wanting to do these things, like you get excited and you feel that urge, but you also know, well, you have to work hard. You have to, bust your ass on this.
For sure. No, it's definitely, it's an everyday thing. For most, it's not just kind of a snap of the finger, quick path. So totally agree.
Yeah. Well, Sebastian, the album is out now. What's on the horizon for you, man?
Well, funny you should ask. I think one thing I've been good at is just keeping my head down. So we've been, pretty much wrapped up with this album for 3 months or so. So I've been spending a ton of time marketing, doing interviews, traveling. We're just getting the live show together. So the immediate thing is that we're entertaining a ton of cool national packages right now for the winter and the spring of this year to come, 2025. And so I'm super eager to get on the road. And then I'm also, most of the way through the follow-up record.
Right.
I was able to pull my buddy Kyle Semino into the live group, and just as we started to mesh again, the juices started flowing and the new songs started coming in, and no better time than traveling around to use that downtime to write. So we're pretty much starting the process over again and adding touring into the mix, and so I think we've got a lot to be excited for.
Right on, man. I love hearing that. And I know it's kind of the old cliche, but you have your whole life to write your first album, right? And then the second one has to come pretty quick. So that's great that you're already working on it.
I just hope I've got enough, stories still to tell. It's definitely one where I felt like I've expended, some of those heartfelt sets of lyrics that I've been sitting on for years. But I've been writing a lot about the journey, and really writing about exactly what we're talking about right now for this follow up. And so I'm really looking forward to it.
Right on, man. Well, and the journey never ends, right? And just like you've been talking about, it's been a journey, and you'll have more and more successes and more accolades and milestones coming, no doubt. But the journey never stops.
Totally. You look at guys like Jesse, you look at guys like Bret Michaels, guys even like my dad, that are closer to 60 or over 60. And that's the greatest, I think, example that those guys can set, is that, hey, age is just a number. Those 3 guys I just mentioned, I think their voices sound better today than ever.
Yeah.
You mentioned Jesse's solo record. Some of those guys are writing better material now than ever. And so
That's
to
right.
me, I'm just trying to soak that in and learn from them like I've always done. And, I think you hit it on the nose. Continuing the journey is definitely the path.
Which is, as you say all that, man, I get a smile on my face because it's amazing to think like, well, man, Sebastian, 30 years from now, like you'd still be doing this, and maybe writing the best music that you've written, which is just kind of mind boggling to even consider.
It's nuts, but it's also inspiring. I think from 20 to 30, it's really easy to get caught up in, oh, I didn't make it at my first attempt. I think Nigel's really a great example of that. He's bounced around from being a singer to being an incredible drummer, for bands like Wayland, to continuing to tour and expand his horizons as well. And it's really been super pivotal for me to be surrounded by guys like that. And it's been a great ride.
Awesome, man. Well, I think that's another good round of advice too, is the people you surround yourself with and the people you look up to, right? The examples that get set in front of you. It's not just, I mean, it certainly is a huge part about your work ethic and like you said, keeping your head down and doing what you got to do. But, it's the people that inspire you. It's the people you keep around you too. I mean, it's that it really is kind of this whole thing that has to come together in order for it to work or have a chance at working.
Totally. No, 100%. And, it's not always just sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Like a lot of those guys that I've mentioned, they're incredible entrepreneurs. They're incredible business-minded people. And so as a business major, I've continued to gravitate even more so to them. They're always doing something new. They're always putting out a new line of totally unrelated product, whether it's a bourbon or a clothing line or a television show. And as you said, surrounding yourself with those type of people just makes you start to eventually think the same way, and to kind of inherit some of that drive and some of that process that those guys do. And, those are the guys that are really doing it so well today, or the ones that weren't just focused on the party and the rock and roll, but also on the business and the livelihood and, providing a future for their kids and so forth. And no, I mean, that's definitely what it's about.
Well, man, if I'm still doing this 30 years from now, if this show is still here 30 years from now, I can't wait to look back on this conversation with you, man.
We will have to do it again. I'll gladly be there.
Sebastian James, thank you so much for hanging tonight, man. Congrats on the release of your new album, Old School Cool. Listeners can catch up on everything going on in your world at sebastianjamesmusic.com. And sounds like that website might get updated relatively soon with some new live shows, a new tour schedule. So I cannot wait to see all that's to come. And man, like we don't have to wait 30 years. Hopefully we can have you back on the show again soon.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Well, thank you, brother. I really appreciate you, appreciate the listeners, and look forward to connecting soon.
That wraps up this episode of Loudwire Nights on Demand. Stay caught up with everything happening in the world of rock and metal on the Loudwire app and at loudwire.com.